Oh. She's just like a toddler. Like she knows as soon as the webinar starts, it's time to bark. All right, I'm going to get started and we'll let folks join in progress here. Welcome. My name is Emily Barras, and I'm the founder and owner of Bold Story Press, a publishing press for women authors only. I'm doing these free webinars to educate women who want to write and share their stories about the process and what the options are available to you, because there are several options available to you. I know if you've ever been a writer and ever tried to have your content published, you may think that the only way to do that was by going through an agent, and it's very difficult to get the attention of an agent. And so you may feel like you really don't have options, but that's simply not true. And so tonight we're going to look at some of the basics about publishing and some options for publishing your work when you get to that point. I wanted to tell you that 36 people signed up, 36 women signed up. And I thought it was interesting. Not everyone identified what they're writing or what they would like to write, but most did. And I thought it was interesting, the mix of things that people are working on. Of the 31, 4 are writing fiction, are writing novels. 8 are just interested in writing and maybe haven't decided what they're writing yet, and they're just here to gather more information. 13 are writing memoirs or stories of family history. 3 are writing business books, and 3 are writing children's books. So an interesting collection of writing interests here. And I think it's wonderful that there are so many memoirs in the mix. So I'm going to share my screen and share some slides with you. And then after I'm done with the slides, there will be plenty of time for questions, but feel free to ask questions as we go. You'll just have to take yourself off mute and speak up, because I won't necessarily be able to see you. So any questions before we get started? I would ask everyone to put themselves on mute for now so that we don't hear any background noise. So the webinar is called Write and Publish Your Book. And as I said, I'm Emily Barras. I worked in the publishing industry for 32 years. My last role was, I was an editor-in-chief at McGraw-Hill in New York, where I managed one of the divisions of college textbook publishing, where we published about 500 books a year. While in publishing, when I first started, it was an apprenticeship model. And so if you wanted to one day run the publishing house, you had to have experience in all facets of the business. And so if you wanted to be an acquisitions editor, you had to be a salesperson. And that meant going out and working in a sales territory, selling books, so that you understood why people bought the books that they bought and how they made buying decisions. So I've worked in sales and marketing, but most of my career was in editorial, acquisitions editorial. I've published a huge number of books. I've made quite a number of mistakes in that process and learned from them. And I had quite a number of best-selling books too. And in fact, I published Greg Mankiw's economics book out of Harvard, which was the best-selling college textbook ever published, best-selling first edition book ever published. And it still holds that record 20 years later. So publishing today has changed tremendously. Even in the last 6 or 7 years, it's changed tremendously. But of course, it's changed tremendously since I started many years ago. There are the introduction of the digital world into the publishing mix radically changed the industry, not surprisingly. But also, there's been an issue of the industry has been aging. And that means editors and agents have been getting older, retiring, and businesses are not necessarily replacing them with people in the same roles. There are 4,000 books being published every day these days, and it's because Amazon and Ingram Spark and some other outlets have made it possible for anyone to upload their book onto the platform and call themselves a published author. And so I don't know if any of you have ever looked at all of the books. Well, of course, you haven't looked at all of the books on Amazon, but if you've looked at some of the books that are they're running specials on for $1 a piece. I know that they used to have for Prime members, you could borrow books and not pay for them. And if you've ever looked at any of those books that weren't recommended by some other source, there's a lot of bad writing out there. A lot. So publishing 4,000 books a day does not mean that those books are selling, and it certainly does not mean that they're high quality books. I had a surprise when I did some research recently about sales in the trade market, print publishing versus ebooks. I assumed that ebooks had overtaken print publishing sales, and I made another wrong assumption. That's not true, by the way. It's still about 70-30, with 70% of sales going to print and 30% to ebooks. I also thought that young people all bought ebooks, and that it was people my age and older who bought the print books. And that's not true either. The younger readers prefer to buy the print copies, and they like to see the covers, and they like to see their collection of books on their shelf, just like I did when I was younger and still do. And it tends to be people in my age bracket, that 50 to 70, who are buying most of the ebooks. We all know that there are fewer stores, that the Barnes and Noble stores have closed and other bookstores. So the majority of books are purchased online now. And so if you want to publish a book today, the biggest challenge is getting it into the hands of potential buyers and potential readers. It's finding your way through all of that noise and finding your potential market. When you're thinking about writing a book, this is something I talk to my authors about all the time. I hated it when an author came to me and said, "What shall I write? What's selling?" Because those authors are rarely successful, and those books are rarely successful. For a book to be really good and to stand out in the crowd, the author has to be passionate or knowledgeable or really interested in the topic. It comes through in the writing. People write books because of their passion about a topic, and I think that's probably true for a number of our memoir writers. People write books to have impact. In the entrepreneurial world, it's now true that authoring a book is a credential that all entrepreneurs should have. Whether or not anyone ever buys that book is not that important, because no one knows what your sales are. But being able to say that you're an author is a prerequisite for speaking at certain conferences. It's almost like a business card in today's entrepreneurial climate. People write business books to grow their business, to help build their brand. People write books to leave a legacy. And I have a class going right now where there are 10 students in the class and 2 of them are 80. Well, one's 82 and one is 80, writing books for the first time because they want to leave something behind when they leave this mortal coil. And I think that's incredible. People write to entertain. If you have a desire to write fiction or any kind of novel, and even poetry. And some people write to make money. Some people make a decision that they want to earn their living through writing, fiction and nonfiction. You need to think about for whom you are writing your book. And that means really, really sitting down and fleshing that out, because as you're writing, you want to be speaking to that potential reader. You want to it's almost like an avatar in the video games. You want to think about who that person is, who needs my book, or who wants my book, who will pay for my book, what do I know about them? If it's a nonfiction book and it has some business topic, who are they? What industries are they in? Where are they in their career? What kinds of challenges are they dealing with in their lives? What kinds of things will drive them to look for help? And then what kind of help do they want? And how will you reach them? And you also have to think about, do you need to change? I love this quote. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. At a young age, I decided, and I can picture what the scenario was now, but I decided I'm just not a writer. I can't write. I'm not a writer. And I just stuck with that story my whole life. And I think probably I grew up in a very large Irish Catholic family. We were very competitive with each other. My older siblings were super smart, and I hated getting grades that weren't, as good as theirs. And I think I must have gotten a C or something on a paper. And so I just decided, that's it. I'm just going to give up right now. I can't write. I'm not a writer. And I've told myself that story my whole life. And until recently, when someone said, that's absurd. You are an editor-in-chief of a major publishing house. Of course you can write. Now, it may be business writing, but of course you have the skill. And of course I do. So that story is a story I told myself my whole life because I was afraid to write, to sit down and start. It's only recently that I've started to get serious about doing that. And I had to look at this issue that I needed to change some things if I was going to accomplish this goal in my life. I also love this quote. This is from Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. So I love that quote because I love the idea of women owning their power, owning their stories, and sharing them with the world. And I think that the young women coming behind us need to hear those stories about our challenges and successes and our failures. And I hate to admit it, but I didn't realize in my 32 years in publishing that I was contributing to a bias against women in the publishing world, but I was, because that real bias did exist. And men were favored, and more books were signed by men, more books written by men were sent for critical review to the New York Times Review of Books, et cetera, so that they won more awards, they sold more copies, et cetera, et cetera. So the system was rigged against women, and it's changing, but it's why I started Bold Story Press, because I want to be a part of that change. So writing your book, what sells? Good writing sells. And I can't stress that enough. I have a friend who retired recently. She was editor-in-chief of the young adult fiction and children's fiction at HarperCollins, and that's pretty big business for them. And she said that until they made the decision to stop allowing unsolicited manuscripts, so anyone who was writing a book could send in their manuscript to HarperCollins. And eventually, it might take a year or two, but eventually you would get a letter back rejecting your manuscript or accepting it. And she said that they would accept unsolicited manuscripts. And as did we at McGraw-Hill, and every editor had a stack of manuscripts in their office until they reached the point where they were receiving 25,000 manuscripts a year. These were unsolicited. And so imagine the majority of those manuscripts were not very well written. And that's a huge drain on any business. And so that's when they implemented the agent in between the publisher and the writer, because they simply couldn't keep up with the volume. And so the agent acts really as a first editor, reading the material, making a decision about which books can go forward to the publishers and which ones cannot. My friend said that even of the small number of books that do make it through from the agents, even with those books, it is the books that are well written that stand out. And I know I firmly believe, I know she firmly believes that every author needs a good editor. I don't care how good of a writer you are. We can't always see what we can't see or hear, in our dialogue or in our writing, what we can't hear. And so if you want to make sure your book is as well written as it possibly can be, you really need to work with an editor before you're sending it to an agent or to a major publisher. If you want to be a writer, you have to write. And that means good writers, most good writers write every day. They develop a habit of writing. Stephen King has a wonderful book on writing that I highly recommend. And he talks about the need to sit in the same place at the same time every day. And he said he has trained himself over the years for the creativity to begin flowing, like Pavlov's dogs, when he sits in that chair, opens up that computer, and says it's time to write. And so writing every day at the same time, and that doesn't mean editing, from 7 to 9. It doesn't mean researching, it means writing. Is one sure way of getting better. You might, in the beginning, write a lot of stuff that isn't as good and that you may never use, but it is a part of the process of honing your skill. And in that process, you'll find your style of writing. Some writers prefer to be very organized and start with a table of contents and then lay down a layer of detail and flesh out the chapter descriptions and then lay down another layer of detail, and then they fill in the pieces as they building their story. Other writers like myself like to just download all of the ideas in our brain. Everything I need and want to say about this story, I need to download it all onto the paper, and then I need to come back and work my way through it, winnowing out all of the material that doesn't belong and tightening the prose and shaping the prose. So there are different styles that work for different people. And I've already said a couple of words about critical review, and I'll say a couple more in a few slides, but it's awfully important. And of course, self-editing is important. No one writes their best writing in a first draft. I mean, I don't know anyone who's ever done that. So it's a process of going back over your material over and over. There are 5 basic phases of publishing: the writing, editing, design, publishing or production, and launching and marketing. Writing, we've talked about. Most books require research, even fiction requires research. The options for writing are to write it all of yourself and then to go to a publisher, and if you were able to find one who would sign you, they might assign a copy editor to work on your text, and a copy editor is editing for style and grammar. A developmental editor is more of a partner in the process. A developmental editor will capture style and grammar issues, but will also comment on the story arc, will comment on the character development, will make suggestions for, I think this would be better phrased this way, writing out sample paragraphs for you. A developmental editor, a good one, can be like a true partner in the process. But of course, they're the most expensive. And if you have a story to tell and you don't want to write it, you can hire a ghostwriter to write it for you. And certainly people do that. So we talked about developmental editing, copy editing. Proofreading is the simplest form of editing. And really, in the old days, when we did most of the publishing, offset publishing, where we actually typeset each of the pages, and then the book was run off on the printer. In the process of typesetting, the printer could introduce errors because they were reproducing the whole book, and it was possible for them to introduce typos or other kinds of errors. And so proofreading used to be just taking the original manuscript and checking it against the page proofs, which are the first sets of pages we would get from the printer. So proofreading today, there's so much printing being done by digital printing now. That's no longer an issue because you don't introduce errors in digital printing. And so proofreading today is often a quick read to catch typos and the simplest of grammatical issues. You'll need to work with a designer and know something or learn something about design, because covers have to be designed. The inside of your book has to be designed. And even if it's a black and white book with no images, no photography or illustrations, it still has to be designed. You have to think about how the page is laid out and what the headings look like, and are the pages too dense with copy and making the reader think, oh, I can't read this. And then illustrations or art for the book, if you're going to have them, that has to be incorporated into the design, and figuring out what kinds of illustrations you're going to use and hiring an illustrator is also part of the process. Production is about, these are just some of the things you have to think about with respect to production, but reading final proofs, checking them, that they're accurate and that the art is in place, and that there are no new errors. You have to think about, if you're self-publishing, you'll have to think about what kind of paper you want the book to be printed on. You all know that there are different weights of paper. a Bible has very thin, tissuey paper. Your typical airport book is a different weight than a hardbound book, is a different weight than a coffee table art book that has heavy laminated paper. So the weight of the paper, usually books are printed in 50-pound paper. What kind of finish the paper has, if it has any at all. You have to think about trim size for the book. Should it be a 6x9 or a 4x6 or an 8x11? And some of those decisions are dictated by the market. If you want your book to be sold in a bookstore, bookstores don't take odd trim size books because they can't fit them on the shelves, or they can't fit them easily, you know, in a group of books. And you have to think about binding. Do you want the book to be sewn or glued, or do you want a spiral binding? If your book needs to be a lay flat format, you're teaching something that you want your readers to be able to see both pages side by side, that needs a special binding. And finally, your book has to be ready to be uploaded onto the ebook platforms, and that requires a certain way of formatting the files. But then you would upload that book to Amazon, to Kobo, to Apple. There are about 7 major ebook platforms. There's my glass. And then finally, launching the book is all about marketing and sales. And if you sign with a major publisher, they will do the marketing and selling. But I can tell you that most major publishers are also dealing with the issue of how do you get a book attention in today's crammed market. So they often will not sign an author unless they already have a platform of followers. And that means, you know, a couple thousand followers on Instagram or Facebook. They definitely will ask you all of that before they even look at your book. If you're self-publishing or you're working with a hybrid publisher, the process is either you do it alone or you may do it in partnership with the publisher. And that usually involves creating a book launch team. And so that's the group of people who are going to help you get the word out on the book. It involves a promotion strategy for the ebook. So on Amazon, you can sell the book for $1 at certain times to try to get attention for the book, or sell it at a reduced cost. There are things you can do with the metadata, which is basically the information that talks to the Amazon algorithms that will help you get your book popping up in searches. And that's critical for the success of your book. If you have a mailing list or a group of family, friends, etc., you'll want to do a direct mailing to those people. And you'll want to get reviews of the book. On Amazon, a book has to have, I'm not sure how many reviews it is now. I think it's 100 before it gets popped up into a different category for attention. So you'll want friends and family to buy the book and review it for you on Amazon. Then also reviews in the critical publications like New York Times Book Review, Review of Books, Publishers Weekly. It used to be true that the major publishers sent books to them for review, and then they decided which books they would be reviewing. Now it's possible with some of those to pay for a review. Publishers Weekly will now do a review for you for $400. You have to get the book to them months in advance. You don't they won't write a positive review for you. They'll write an honest review for you. And then you decide if you want to use that review in your marketing. But you can buy reviews now from some outlets. So the types of publishing, basically there are three basic ways to publish a book today. You can get an agent and get a contract from one of the major publishers. And that arrangement usually looks like, if sometimes they'll offer you an advance when they sign the book of a couple $1,000s, then they will incur the costs to publish the book. They will pay for the editor, they will pay for the design, they will do some marketing and sales. They will pay you a royalty of about 15% of net sales. So once they've subtracted all the costs for the editor and the sales force and the cover design, whatever profit is left, you receive about 15% of that profit. You can self-publish, and a lot of people are doing it now. And that means find your own cover designer, find your own editor, and there are lots of sites and places to go to find good people. But again, there are thousands, tens of thousands of them out there, and it's figuring out who the good ones are that can be tricky. You can buy your own ISBN, you can get your own copyright, and then you can upload your book onto Amazon or Ingram Spark and sell a paperback version of your book through Amazon that is printed on demand and shipped from Amazon. And as I said, a lot of people are doing it. And then hybrid publishers, which is what my publishing company is the business in between the two. So we will do all of the work to publish a professional, high quality book, but you pay the flat costs up front, and then we either share the royalty 50-50, or we pay you 90% of the royalty and we keep 10 or 15%. And so it's kind of flipping the traditional model on its head. So those are the three basic ways to publish today. This is a great graphic to give you an idea of what the process looks like in terms of numbers. So it used to be true that 1,000 book ideas would, authors would send their query letters to the literary agents. And as you can see here in this image, they're using a filter from a gas heater. Only 25 books would make it through that process. So out of 1,000 books, only 25 books will make it to the editors in the traditional publishing house. Of those 25 books that make it into the traditional publishing house, only 5 of those 25 will be published, will actually make it out into the market and be available to book buyers and the Barnes and Noble chains, et cetera, who make the decisions about which books go on the shelves. And out of those 5 books, 1 will become a best-selling book. So it's 1,000 to 1. With self-publishing, it's changed this process in that of those 1,000 books being sent to literary agents, today, about 50 of those are now written and self-published. And so they're skipping the literary agent, and they're skipping the traditional publisher, and they're going directly to getting the word out to the book buyers themselves. And of those 50, this says 1 self-published book will become a bestseller. I think that's probably pretty generous, but you have a much better shot of getting there because the book will be published. So I have a couple recommendations for you, and then I'll turn these slides off and I can answer questions for you. If you're just starting out, you may find taking a class is really helpful. And I find that even good writers are helped by writing in groups like that, and are helped by good teachers. We all can get better at this craft, and getting feedback constantly from a good teacher makes everybody better, in my opinion. You can find, and you should, find a writing community. And in that community, you will find support. You can find an accountability partner so that you can set goals for yourself for your writing, and check in with that person once a week and have them read content and give you feedback. You should write every day, as I suggested, and you should get feedback on your writing, and not just from loved ones, because we all know that loved ones don't want to hurt our feelings, and it's very hard. We're not all trained in how to give constructive feedback to someone, and we're not all trained on how to receive constructive feedback. And so you really need some objective readers in your life who will read your material and tell you honestly how you can make it stronger. So I'll finish this off with a quote. There's power in allowing yourself to be known and heard, in owning your unique story, in using your authentic voice. And there's grace in being willing to know and hear others. It's Michelle Obama. So, tell me, do you have questions? I should tell you that I run a class. I'm running it again in January. We have 2 more classes in this session, and I keep it to about 10 to 12 writers. They are an amazing community of women who are absolutely in love with each other and plan to stay together forever. But in that class, I teach what I've taught tonight in greater detail, so that if you want to publish your own book, I'll help you find that editor and the designer, and give you much more of the detail about how you can do that, but also support in the writing part. So about half the class is devoted to writing, and about half of the class is devoted to publishing, and the details behind that process. And then Bold Story Press also publishes women's books. If you have a book that you've completed and you want to send it to us to consider for publication, I'd be very happy to talk to you about that too. And we could set up a call at another time. So, questions about publishing? Has anyone here ever published? You may have to take yourself off mute.
So I have a really simple question, and I Google it all the time, and I'm curious your answer. What is the font size and the font, and how much spacing on each page of something that you submit for consideration?
Well, that usually differs by publisher and agent. Almost all of them have that printed in material on their website, that, under submissions. So usually they want double-spaced manuscript. They want usually around 12-point font type. And usually they want a prospectus that tells them, about the book, about the market, about they'll ask you a number of marketing questions in there. So different agents and different publishers may tweak that a little bit, but generally speaking, if you go on to any website, you can go on to our website, look under submissions. It will tell you how to submit the material very specifically.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
just that so many different ones say different font styles, and it's just, each font style. I mean, I've tried different ones, and then the number of your pages changes, and I mean all sorts of stuff. And so, I'm just trying to figure out, how do I have enough words, or enough pages? I mean, is it 40,000 words is like the least amount of least amount of words for a memoir?
Well, what do you mean least amount?
Well,
I
like,
mean,
minimum, maximum, like don't even think of sending something that's less than 40,000 words. I mean, I've read that too.
yeah, I mean, most publishers won't. So the issue is that the book has to be of a certain size in order to charge a certain price, right? And if you fall below that price, let's say it's $10, then it's almost not worth it to publish it at all for the publisher. And so that's why they require a certain page count. 40,000 is kind of low.
Right.
So
60,000.
Yeah, I'd say at 50 to 75 is more in the average. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're writing a memoir and you're struggling, you can always interview people, include their, stories from them, but other questions? Nanette, do you have a question? You have to take yourself off mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Really? Okay, great. So is the idea that you have to have a completed manuscript to deal with all three of these different publishing scenarios? Or what about the idea of coming up with a prospectus and a table of contents and an idea for a book, but it's not actually completed yet? Or is the idea you really have to complete the book before you talk to a publisher?
So it depends on the kind of book. If it's a novel or a memoir, yeah, they want it completed. If it is a technical book, and certainly in the textbook world, we did not want to sign books that were completed because we knew the markets in a way that the author did not, and we wanted to have impact in the way the content was developed and the way it was written. And so if it was already written, it was much more of a struggle to get the author to make changes that we wanted. So we shied away from manuscripts that were already completed. But for the most part, for the kinds of books I think that most of you would write, the publisher wants, they're not going to want you to send them the whole manuscript, but they do want the book to be written.
So in my particular,
Go ahead. Yeah.
So just as a follow-up, in my case, it would be a textbook or a business book for a general management leadership audience.
Okay.
So in that case, would it be better to start with a concept and a prospectus as opposed to completing the entire book?
It depends. If it is a book to be adopted in colleges, as opposed to purchased by professionals, if it's to be purchased by professionals, they probably would prefer that it be completed. If it's to be adopted in colleges and undergraduate or graduate programs, I think that you can talk to them before it's completed, but you would want to have, some substantial content written. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question about agents.
Go ahead.
Am I talking?
Mariah, do you want to go first? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm at the stage where I have an idea. I have about 60% written, but the book in my head is all beautiful, but what's on the page is not so much. So I understand that I want a developmental editor, somebody who would, you know, be a partner in writing. Because I've written science papers, but I've never written a book, a self-help book. But then for self-help, like, how do I find it? Is it something you would teach in one of your classes, or is it something that can be short?
How do you find the development editor? Yeah, what kind of book is this, Mariah?
Self-help.
Self-help?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd be happy to talk to you offline and can give you some suggestions. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Should I email you back?
Yeah, and we'll schedule a call. Yeah. Oh, actually, I'll email everyone after after we're done here, because I did record it and it's not for public use, but I'll share the video with you if you want to look at it, and then ask if you'd like to schedule a conversation. Yeah. So Mary?
Thanks. I had a question about agents. What do they do for you? How do you find one that's good? And the other question kind of goes along with that is, how can you tell based on the genre of your book, which is the best publishing route to choose?
Well, I hate to say it, but it's almost impossible to get your manuscript in front of a traditional publisher, because it's not, unless you are a celebrity or someone that the publishers are chasing for some reason. They receive so many queries about books that they're constantly fighting the battle of weeding out, you know, the books. And so getting the attention of an agent to see the real value of what you've written is very hard to do. And I have heard more horror stories about people who have sent 100 query letters and get nothing for a year. And then after a year, you know, they get some rejection letters that are form letters, you know, rejections. It's very hard. You almost have to know someone or have some compelling story that you can tell in that query letter to catch their attention, or you have to have an in or an edge, or, you know, something. So, and that's the reason I think that hybrid publishers have, you know, sprung up, because there was and is a need for more people who want to publish than are able to through the existing industry norms. And so you often will have a better chance with a hybrid publisher than a major publisher. And self-publishing is also an option. I mean, a lot of people do it, 4,000 people a day.
So what would you say are the advantages and disadvantages of self-publishing versus the advantages and disadvantages of hybrid publishing?
The quality of the people you'll work with, right? I went on to Fiverr tonight. Do you know what that is? It's one of those work aggregator sites, you know, where Odesk is one of them, Upwork is one of them, where editors, designers, coders, people from all around the world put themselves up on these sites and say, I'm available to do graphic design or developmental editing, and I'm in the Philippines, or I'm in India, or and I charge $25 an hour, or I charge $125 an hour, or I charge $5 an hour. So tonight I was looking at illustrators because we have some children's books that that we need some illustrators for, and it's just it's the chaos of the volume of people who are available out there to do the work that you need done, and it's figuring out who is going to do it well so that I will be thrilled with how professional and proud of how professionally done my book is, that it's edited beautifully, that it has made my prose much stronger, that the book cover and illustrations and design is gorgeous. That's the advantage of working with a hybrid publisher. They either have those people on staff or they're working with a team of people whom they've trained or worked with in the professional publishing world. And that's who I'm working with, are the people I worked with at McGraw-Hill and at other publishing houses. So that's the advantage with a hybrid publisher. The challenge with both self-publishing and hybrid publishing is that the bulk of the marketing and sales is your responsibility, because the hybrid publishers are not set up with sales forces and marketing staff. And so the hybrid publisher will help you create a launch strategy and will set you up and help you create a website, but they don't have someone who's going out knocking on doors the way the traditional publishers, I should say the way that traditional publishers used to. Even the traditional publishers, if you remember that graphic, could only get 5 of their books, into the bookstores and into the hands of the book buyers.
Oh, Emily?
Yes.
Hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Lorraine.
I have a manuscript that I had edited, and it was initially it was about almost 6,000 words. Now it's edited down to almost 50,000 words. And I've been scouting for an agent, writing query letters, as you said.
Right.
And I've gotten a lot of rejections, but I've gotten some, interesting comments. So I may be ready to, I guess, send you my manuscript to look
Great.
at.
Okay. That sounds good. So that's great. You did get some feedback from the agents?
I did. Now I went through, have you heard of Book Butchers? They're an editing company called Book Butchers.
Book Butchers?
Yes.
That's interesting.
I know, it was an interesting name.
A little scary, that name.
I know it was. But I did look them up and they were legitimate. So I went through them for the editing, and I've just been trying to find an agent at this point, but as you said, it is very difficult.
Well, the truth is that major publishers aren't marketing and selling the way they used to. And I think that if this is a passion project for you, if this is something you want to do, and you'll get it out to your community, and we can maximize the ways you can get the word out through your networks, then I would say hybrid publishing is the way to go. If you want to sell 100,000 copies of your book, then I would advise you to continue trying to get an agent and into a traditional publisher, because I don't think it's realistic, that a book with a hybrid publisher will sell 100,000 copies. I think it's more likely if the sales are really taking off, that HarperCollins will come knock on the door of the hybrid publisher and say, hey, we'd like to buy that title from you. Which, if it's in the best interest of the author, will happen.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What is considered, either in hybrid publishing or traditional publishing, what is sort of the minimal number of books you need to sell to be considered successful?
So that's a great question, Annie. I would say of the We published 500 books a year in my division. And I've heard some of these numbers before. I think they're probably worse now on the trade side. But the typical book, and this is going back, the typical book sells 2,000 copies over the life of its edition.
Wow. Wow.
So if you consider that most books stay in print, 6, 7, 10 years, that means the typical book. And I worked for a publisher where we had 25 books a year that were selling 50, 75,000 books a year. So if those books were taking up that portion, we had a lot of books that never sold very many copies at all. And that's because publishing is really a form of gambling because you don't know how the readers will embrace the book, and you don't know if how successful it will be until it's out there in the market and reviewed. And so you take a lot of chances in publishing, and you sign all of these books, and then some percentage of them hit and do really well, and they pay for all of the other books that didn't sell very well. So the average sales for a book is not very high. So you can't, I would argue, don't do it for the money.
Right. Yeah, but I was just curious, what constitutes success?
Yeah, I think you you define success.
Yeah.
Right.
Emily, could you explain with your hybrid publishing house, do you do the offset bulk printing? Whereas with, self-publishing, if you go to someplace like blurb.com, they're doing one at a time and it's very expensive. If you can do the offset, it's a lot less expensive and you can print off 100, 500, 1,000.
We do. So we do, well, actually I should say, we create the file that goes to the printer to print your book, and incur all the costs associated with that so that the printer is ready to go. You pay for the cost of the printing, and that would be the unit cost of the books.
So is your printer in China, or where is the printing done?
Oh, no, we don't. We do the printing in the United States. But also, Judith, I'm quick to tell you that I just started Bold Story Press, and I am just signing our first books now. So we are, I don't have, my experience is from my McGraw-Hill days, not from my Bold Story Press experience. But the printers I'm talking to are in Baltimore, in Chicago, and they're printers that I knew from my McGraw-Hill days.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay. So they're high quality. My book is going to have photographs in it, and so it needs to be of a high quality.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yep.
Another question. My book is written. I put together a team of 5 editors
Wow.
who've edited it for me.
Wow.
And I'm in the process of finishing those edits up now, which, by the way, is the worst part of writing this book, is doing the edits. I've also engaged the marketing folks who are going to get me launched a website, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, those kinds of things. So I'm getting ready to go forward on that in the next few weeks.
And who are you using for that?
I'm using people that I just happen to know.
Oh, okay.
Do that. This is what they do for a job, but I happen to know them,
Okay.
as a friend who has a friend.
Right.
So with the idea that I am then going to offer classes on my book and try to get people to buy classes for the book for me to launch those classes online in January. because I taught the book as a way of self-editing. That's also a way I did self-editing. At that point, I'm going to have that part done, but getting that next step, like having it edited one more time by an even more professional editor and getting it put into an actual book form. Would you pick that up? Would a hybrid company, your company, pick that up at that point, at any point along the line, or only from the very beginning?
Well, we should talk, Mary, because I would need to know more of the details and what you still need. But I mean, absolutely, let's talk offline about where you are and what you want to do. Yeah.
So I have another question. One of the things that I found intriguing in your email that got me to join this seminar was that you thought there were not enough women books, women voices, which I found kind of intriguing. And I was curious, is that like in general, like in every single kind of genre, there's just not enough women voices? Or is there anything in particular that you find that it's just, it's just a hole, it's like missing? Like, are there fewer memoirs? If in memoir, is there certain points of view or sectors, or like, oh, I wish there was more of X. I'm just so curious about that, because I don't really know what you mean by it. I love hearing it, but I don't really know what I mean or you mean.
So before I started Bold Story Press, I started a business called Bold in Business, and I coached women on how to own their power. And basically, I wrote an online class and taught it to women, and where I taught them how to let go of people pleasing and perfectionism so that they could take bolder risks and own their power in the business world, ask for what they want, speak up in meetings, all of those good things. And through my research, I also was just slowly but surely over the period of a couple of years realizing that that the patriarchy, okay, so some of my politics will come out here, so forgive me, but we all grew up in a patriarchal culture, right? I mean, that's what the culture is, and that's not, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I personally believe the world would be a better place if 50% of the content that every child, read in school, or every decision made in Congress and in the Senate, were made by men and women, not just men. The world would be a better place. And so that's when I went back and started looking at the publishing world and realized that the huge majority of school books were being written by men at one time, and while women were in lower level roles in publishing, the men were all at the top, and so they were making all the business decisions. Of the 10 best-selling books of all time, 8 of them were authored by men. When you look at the awards for the Booker and Pulitzer and all of the book awards that are given out each year, they are disproportionately won by men. And you might just think, well, men are better writers, or men had an advantage because they've been writing or publishing longer than women, but the truth is that the publishing houses were sending more books authored by men to the critical review sites. And so there was a bias, there was an ingrained bias that I think was just, I don't think there was anything, I think it was just part of our culture, and that it is evolving now. And I think to catch up, that if we are going to have a world where we don't still have to teach women that they don't have to please other people, you know, in business, or they don't have to be perfect in order to speak up, that more women's stories, more women's books, more of the women need to be writing those textbooks, more of the women need to be the teachers and the mentors, just to balance the content in the world, just to balance the voices and the culture. And so that's all my personal beliefs. And that's why I started Bold Story Press, because some of my favorite people in the world are men, my son, my father, my ex, but they've had an advantage. And I think it's time that that women work to catch up. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think the problem is deeper than just not choosing women writers, because I think women writers write differently, and people, even in people like yourself, are used to a certain kind of assertiveness or aggressiveness, or, you know, men have defined success in a powerful way, and women have to redefine success, and they don't always have to come across as powerful, because men always define success as powerful. And so sometimes when I keep hearing, well, I want to empower women to know their power, I got into this conversation with this woman that was teaching women's studies at Georgetown. And this is a digression, but it was very interesting in this conversation, because I called her because I was reading an article about this young woman who was kicking ass and all of this stuff. And the woman was, this professor was quoted, and I called her and I said, why is it that every time now when we describe a woman who is owning her power and is kicking ass, they take on such masculine qualities? And so why is that now so different? It's just women becoming more like men. And she said, you're absolutely right. And that when power changed, one of the most striking times when power changed was Hillary Clinton sitting for 11 hours in the Benghazi hearings. She wasn't showing her power. She was just patient and quiet and answering questions. So I bring that up because I produced a movie, and the critics were very critical of the movie, but they were viewing it from a man's point of view, and it was a woman's voice.
So Catherine, I'd love to talk to you more about this offline.
Yeah, but I'm just, the reason why I asked was when you say women voices, I'm so curious what you mean by that.
So when I was working in empowerment, it was specifically in the culture of business, because men are still running that game and power matters there if you want to win. In this, what I'm doing right now, this is what I am able to do with my life and have chosen to do. It is not about women being aggressive or louder or stronger, or it is about women being authentic and sharing their stories and having the opportunity to do that.
Yeah,
that's what this is. Yeah. So
that's what my book is about that I want to write.
Oh, good. There you go. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How do we find out about your class?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, when I follow up with you with the email, I'll give you information about the class, and if you'd like to schedule a call, we can do that.
Okay,
it's I'm kind of surprised, but then I'm enthralled with women. I think like the power of women getting together and supporting each other. And, you know, part of what we do is I teach them how to give constructive feedback and how to accept it, because, you know, if you want to get better, you have to, you know, and so they are doing that for each other, and it's pretty incredible. And you know, they're in their 80s, they're in their 20s. It's cool.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
Does all that you've discussed tonight also apply to writing plays as opposed to books, or is it something totally different?
Well, Wanda, that's an interesting question. And we should talk also offline.
Okay.
Because one of the women that I'm working with is a director on Broadway, and she is in a group. She's writing a novel, I mean a memoir though. It's not a play right now, though it might be in the future. But she is in a writer's group with playwrights. And so we should talk
Okay.
offline.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for coming. You were a great group. And I hope to talk to all of you separately, but good luck to you with your writing, and I hope I wish you much success.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Great.
much, Emily. It was very helpful and wonderful.
Yeah,
Thanks.
wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.